What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty Ninja, and last Friday we got one of, maybe it might have actually been my most anticipated game of 2025 if I remember correctly. And that game that I'm referring to, of course, is Elden Ring Nightreign. We got it last Friday. Of course, since I'm making this video, I've played it and I want to talk about it. So without further ado, let's rock. Released on May 30th, Nightreign is an Elden Ring co-op spin-off, developed of course by FromSoftware. It dropped on all platforms, including, surprisingly, PS4 and Xbox One. You don't see that very often anymore. The only exception is it did not come out on the Switch. I personally played it on my Xbox Series S. Nightreign, you can either play it solo or in a team of 3. They are apparently working on duos, and that's going to be added post-launch, but as of right now, you can only play solo or a team of 3. Players pilot one of 8 pre-built classes dubbed Nightfarers that get dropped in the opening stage of Elden Ring and spend 3 in-game days preparing for the final boss, dubbed the Nightlord. And if I'm being 100% honest, this isn't normally a game I would give 2 shits about. This is a game that you can technically play solo, like I just said, and a recent patch made playing solo a lot easier, but Nightreign is very difficult and is clearly a game developed with 3 players in mind, and that's just usually not my type of game that I want to play, and this actually might turn some people off immediately, but I kind of think of this as Elden Ring Fortnite, and I don't mean that in a mean way. Fortnite isn't really my cup of tea anymore, but there was a brief moment where I did play it, and I played it a lot. And I kind of just describe this as Elden Ring Fortnite is kind of shorthand, because I'm sure everyone watching this video has at least played a match or 2 of Fortnite, so kind of people know what I mean when I say Nightreign. Nightreign is Elden Ring if it had a baby with Fortnite. It's not Battle Royale, but it plays very similar to Fortnite and games like it, and we'll get to that here in a second. And again, it's usually not my jam. I was, however, very psyched for this game because Elden Ring is one of my favorite games of all time, and while I'm certainly not a FromSoftware diehard, I really have only gotten into those games in the last 5 to 6 years, but every FromSoftware game that I've played, in my opinion, has been very good. So take Elden Ring being one of my favorite games of all time, mix it with my experience with FromSoftware games, I'm definitely going to give them the benefit of the doubt, even though, again, Nightreign wasn't a type of game that I normally would get very excited about. And because of all of that, I'm actually really surprised by how much fun I'm having with Nightreign. Do I wish that they just made an Elden Ring sequel? Of course, but this is what we got, and it's better than nothing, and I'm trying to make the best of it. I do think that if you are some of the lucky few that do have 2 good, reliable friends to play this with, I imagine that is a far better experience than what I'm currently going through, which is praying that I get teammates that have ever played a FromSoftware game before. I'm not saying that I'm an expert in these games by any means. Like I just said, I've only gotten into them in the last 5-6 years, and I am definitely not a master of these games by any means, but if I'm the one kind of having to lead our trio, if I'm the one pinning churches and telling everybody where to go, it's probably going to be a bad time. And I've definitely had a few runs where I felt like I had to become the leader of the group, and again, those never ended up being good runs. I will say that the decision to not have crossplay, or especially voice chat, in a co-op game is absolutely absurd, especially a game like this where it makes you play with 3 people essentially, and chances are you're probably not going to have 2 other friends to play this game with, so you're probably going to end up having to play with at least 1 stranger. So the fact that you can't talk to each other is wild to me. I will say that the crossplay thing is a little annoying, and some of that is mostly the lack of research on my part, but if I had known, and this is going to make me sound such an asshole, but if I had known that there wasn't going to be crossplay, I probably wouldn't have bought it on Xbox. I've just been in the Xbox ecosystem for the longest, so I'm always going to lean towards that platform if I have an option. And I hate to sound smug, but I regret not trusting the PC master race with this game. if I had known that there wasn't going to be crossplay, I probably would have bought it on PC instead of Xbox. I think I would have had a better time, or maybe an easier time finding players that are more familiar with these types of games than I have been on Xbox. Recently, I've actually had some pretty good luck. I've actually added a couple of people on my friends list just to play this game because I've had good games with them. So it's not been all bad, but there's definitely been a lot of runs where I've jumped in with 2 other randos, and it's pretty clear to me that they either don't know how to play this game or have never played a FromSoftware game before. So I did start off this game last Friday when it came out, playing solo. I honestly had no real intention of actually trying to beat it solo. Like I said earlier, it's a little bit easier to play solo now. I haven't actually tried it since the recent patch, but I've heard it's a lot easier. But I knew it was going to be difficult playing solo, so I really didn't have any like illusions that I was gonna be able to beat it solo. I really kind of just wanted to try it out, just kind of see what Nightreign was all about, because if I'm gonna play with 2 other strangers, I'm not an asshole. I'm gonna try to be a good teammate and kind of stick with my teammates and try to revive them when I can revive them, that sort of thing. So I just kind of wanted to try this game out real quick before I felt like obligated to be a good teammate. And again, at launch, it is technically possible to beat a Nightlord solo, but that's really only for the true FromSoftware diehards, which I certainly do not count myself among those badasses. So again, I tried it out just to kind of figure out where everything was, how things worked in this game, but I had no real illusion that I was going to beat it solo. However, once I decided to kind of take the leap into playing with strangers, I got to a Nightlord literally the first 3 runs I play with randos, and I literally thought, I was like, this is gonna be easier than I thought. Unfortunately, I woke up the next day kind of planning on playing it off and on the rest of the day, and I think I might have gotten to a Nightlord maybe 1 time in that whole day. Again, I didn't play the entire day. It was kind of off and on. I had a few things that was going on at the time, so I didn't get to play every day, or all day, excuse me. So yeah, it was bad for a while there. I had some pretty bad luck. Side note, I am technically calling this video my full review, even though I haven't technically beaten all the Nightlords yet. So I know I'm probably, if you've been watching this channel for a while, I'm probably talking out of both sides of my mouth, because I do tend to make a big deal about like first impressions versus full reviews, because I don't like call something my full review if I've never actually like beaten the game. But I do think that this game is a little bit different, especially the way that it plays and the fact that there is technically a story and there's a lot of lore with this, but you're probably not playing it for the story, and a lot of it, honestly, is reused from Elden Ring, the base game, and I've played a ton of that game. I probably have, between the 2 platforms that I played it on, I probably have 500 hours into that game, and a lot of this is kind of the same thing over and over again. It's kind of a little bit of a grind, especially if you're just like replaying to beat a particular Nightlord. And so it feels like the last like 5-6 hours I've played kind of felt like they blended together a little bit. So I really highly doubt that my opinions are going to change based on a few Nightlords I haven't beaten yet. But let's back up a little bit. The reason I call Nightreign, and of course, I'm not the only one that's made this comparison. I don't think it's a unique thought by any means. The reason I call this Elden Ring Fortnite is because, again, it plays very similarly. You drop into the map, you drop into the opening area of Limgrave using a spectral hawk that looks suspiciously like a glider. And from what I can tell, the terrain basically stays the same. However, it's the churches, the dungeons, the field bosses, etc. Those locations are procedurally generated, so they're going to be different every run. I will say that they're not that different though, especially a lot of the field bosses do feel like they spawn in the same spot. I feel like I've run into the tree sentinel in the same exact spot several times. I do think that it doesn't rotate as much as I would have liked it to. But of course, your objective is to gain as much runes, useful items, and cool weapons by killing enemies and looting dungeons and stuff like that to better prepare yourself for the end fight with the Nightlord. And as you would expect from a game like this, you have a limited amount of time to acquire these upgrades, as the storm or the circle forces you into a smaller and smaller area of the map until you're trapped into a space no bigger than your usual FromSoftware boss arena. It's broken up into 2 in-game day and 3 night cycles. So day 1, you drop into the map, explore and gather as much as you can. Once the circle gets smaller and smaller, you will eventually square off against a random boss during the night phase. Most of these are reused bosses from Elden Ring and the DLC. The same can be said for the field bosses you find scattered throughout the map. However, once you get to the Nightlord, those bosses are completely different. They're completely unique to this game. If you defeat that boss during night 1, the circle dissipates, allowing you to gain access to the full map again, and the cycle starts over for day and night 2. Once you defeat the night 2 boss is when you gain access to the Nightlord arena. So you have 2 full day and night cycles for day 1 and day 2. However, day 3 is just the Nightlord battle. There are 8 total Nightlords, and each run takes about 45 minutes. So in theory, this game is relatively short. If you just buy this game to be like, hey, I just want to beat every Nightlord, it's probably only going to take you a handful of hours if you're really good at these games. But as you probably have already gathered, since it's a FromSoftware game, the field bosses, and especially the Nightlords, are a bitch to deal with. And honestly, I think this is a major area where Nightreign struggles. Because one thing I love about the FromSoftware games and games like it is the idea that, especially me, because I'm not that good at these games, that if I'm patient and determined enough and through trial and error, I can eventually beat these bosses. I can eventually just kind of bang my head against the wall until that boss clicks, until I learn their moveset or whatever, and I eventually kind of persevere through it. Yeah, there are some really annoying boss walkbacks in a couple of these games, but one of the things I loved about Elden Ring so much was there's a save point basically right outside of every boss arena of that game. So you could easily, within like 20-30 seconds of dying from a boss, you could be right back in the thick of it and actually trying it again. And so that makes that process of trial and error and learning the moves and learning the boss an easier pill to swallow. Unfortunately, in Nightreign, because of the way that it's built, if you're struggling with a particular Nightlord, if you're lucky and you can get to the Nightlord the next run, it's still going to be 30 to 40-ish minutes before you have a chance to try it again. So if you get to a Nightlord and you die immediately, it's like, okay, well, I didn't get any information from that run. And so that can be very frustrating. And I think it kind of goes counter to what makes some of these games fun, especially considering there have been plenty of runs where we have gotten to the Nightlord and I just knew, because we didn't have the right weapons or items, or we just weren't high enough level, whatever, that we just weren't going to make it. And that can be a very frustrating experience. I do want to point out that I do like how the weapons are handled in Nightreign. So in the base game, in the original recipe Elden Ring, you had to be using a weapon for you to get the buff from it. Of course, in Nightreign, each weapon has a damage output. Your starting weapons are going to be trash and you're going to try to get rid of those immediately. But they also have buffs to them. They have special abilities, like you can get HP from attacking with that weapon, or you have a stamina boost or something. You get that buff from, I would say, 90% of the weapons, as long as it's in your inventory. Again, in Elden Ring, you have to be using that weapon to get the buff. In Nightreign, they make it a little bit more streamlined and it just has to be in your inventory. So I like that quite a lot, especially given the structure of the rest of the game and the fact that each Nightlord will be vulnerable to certain types of damage and attacks. So when you're picking your weapons, when you beat a field boss or whatever and they drop a bunch of weapons, you want to pick accordingly, and you don't have to pick and choose your weapons based on the weapon that you want to use. You can still get that buff no matter what. And so I thought that was a really good choice. And also, the Nightfarers have their own special abilities. Each class has their own passive ability that, of course, happens all the time. You don't have to do anything. That's why it's a passive ability. Don't know why I just explained what passive means. And then there are 2 attacks, one minor and one ultimate, that do have cooldowns that have to be triggered by you. Some of these abilities stack with other Nightfarer abilities, so you kind of want to pick your main accordingly based on what your teammates have picked. I would suggest doing like maybe 2 or 3 runs per Nightfarer when you first start out to kind of get a feel of each class and see which one feels the best, and maybe have a main and a backup. And as you probably can tell by the footage that I'm showing you, my personal main is Iron Eye. I do get the impression that he's not a popular character. However, I really like playing as the archer. It's been a lot of fun. Plus, his passive ability allows you to find more items, which is super useful. His minor attack seems to do a lot of stance damage, which I appreciate, and his ultimate, where he pulls out a giant bow and arrow, is really fun, and I never got tired of doing it. However, that being said, if you are more of a badass and more daring than I am and want to try this game solo, I would suggest using Wilder, because his passive ability gives you 1 free self-revive. There are also items that you can buy that will also give you a self-revive that only work in solo matches, but they are rare and expensive. The most recent patch also gives you a self-revive per major boss battle. So the more self-revives that you can stack, the better. So again, that's why I would suggest using Wilder if you are going to try this game solo. You do have an opportunity to upgrade each Nightfarer with relics that you can acquire randomly after each run, and they can also be purchased from a vendor at the Round Table Hold. And by purchase, I do want to point out that I mean in-game currency that you earn by playing the game. There are, as of right now, no microtransactions, and based on FromSoftware's history, I'd imagine there's never going to be microtransactions in this game. And these relics do help, that's why I pointed them out, but honestly, most of them are trash. They're not going to be a huge advantage for you. Some of them, there are levels to them, some are a lot better than others, but your biggest advantage, of course, is going to be better weapons and items, and of course, upgrading your character's level via runes. And of course, all of those things can only be done while you're playing, while you're on an expedition. So basically, what happens as soon as you drop in, from the moment you step foot on Limgrave, you basically have to be sprinting the entire time, because you have a very limited amount of time to get as much stuff and kill as many bosses that you can before the night comes. That's why I like Iron Eye's passive ability a lot, because he gives you the ability to find more items, and that stuff is paramount in this game, which is another complaint I have about Nightreign. I do think it kind of takes a lot of the fun out of the original Elden Ring game. Because one of the things that I've praised that game since day one is that it's one of those games that wants you to explore, but not only that, it's probably one of the best games, as far as I'm concerned, in rewarding you for that exploration. There doesn't feel like there's any wasted space in this open world. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think that Elden Ring is the most bang for your buck that you get maybe since Red Dead Redemption 2 or The Witcher 3 or games like that. Like, it's up there with those types of games where it's like, if you explore, there's a ton of stuff to find, and it always feels satisfying and rewarding when you beat a weird side boss that you kind of just stumbled across randomly. And because Nightreign is built the way that it's built, you don't really have time to explore. You kind of feel like you're just running around like you're on PCP the whole time. So you kind of lose that sense of exploration. Again, that's why I would suggest maybe kind of doing what I did, which is just trying it out solo, kind of experiencing the world a little bit before you drop in with other people, where you don't have to feel like you're obligated to be a good teammate. So that's definitely a bummer, because I really love original recipe Elden Ring, and that's one of the things I love about that game so much. And so that's definitely a bummer, but at the end of the day, it's still Limgrave. And so I do want to give Nightreign credit, even though a lot of it's reused from Elden Ring, it still looks and plays great, as you would expect from a FromSoftware game. I had 0 technical issues. Matchmaking has been really smooth for me, which was a big thing that I was curious about going into this, because my limited experience with these games and the little multiplayer they have in them has not been great. And I know that they're kind of notorious for having very clunky multiplayer. And so I was nervous with a game that's based on being co-op and based on being a multiplayer game. I was kind of nervous to see how this was going to run. And I did hear a story where people were having trouble with multiplayer for a while, but it was while I was at work, and they must have figured it out, because by the time I got home that night, it worked seamlessly. So they must have worked out the kinks while I was at work, which was good for me, not so much for the people that were struggling with it. But Again, I had zero technical issues. Every time I went into a match, it probably took me maybe 30 seconds to find other 2 people. Now, again, getting matched with people who know what they're doing is another thing, but I never had trouble actually finding a game. I do want to mention real quick that there is story with Nightreign, but it's pretty sparse, and you're probably not playing this game for the story. There are these kind of like pseudo side quests that you can unlock for each Nightfarer that do give you a little bit more story, but honestly, you could play this game for hours and not know what the hell's going on. I joke around, literally the first time I even played the base Elden Ring game, I basically beat it before I really even knew what was happening. I was more kind of in awe of the environment and, again, the open world, like the exploration and just the intense boss battles, and I just thought it was such a cool game that it wasn't until like later replays that I kind of figure out more of the lore and kind of dig into that stuff. So again, it's kind of similar. It has some story, but you could play this game forever and never really know what was going on with it. So I did want to mention that there is a little bit of story, but it's not a big part of Nightreign. So wrapping up this video, I have had some fun with it. I will admit, if I personally had the ability or money or whatever to make an Elden Ring spin-off or an expansion, whatever you want to call it, this is not the game I would make, just because, again, this is not really the style of game that I usually play, but I've been having a lot of fun with it just because I love the base game, the original recipe, and the DLC so much that it's been kind of fun. I know some people have complained about oh, they just reused the assets. They kind of put the same thing in a different wrapping. And I see that, but because I love this game so much, or I should say the base game, the original game so much, and the DLC, it's just kind of been a fun way to re-experience the game. Of course, I've replayed Elden Ring a few times now, but it's just been kind of a fun experience to essentially re-experience Elden Ring and at least part of Limgrave for another time. And so I've been really enjoying it. And honestly, I think some people might disagree with me, but I actually think it's kind of an interesting way to experience it for the first time. Maybe there's somebody watching this video that has never played Elden Ring because maybe they're intimidated by the depth of some of these game mechanics, or they're intimidated by the boss battles or whatever. I do think because of the nature of this game, they did have to streamline a lot of stuff. It's not as complicated. Upgrading, you don't have to pick a particular area or ability or quality that you're upgrading. You can just hit the upgrade and it's gonna do it for you. The items are very streamlined. The weapons, again, you just have to have them in your inventory for them to give you the buffs. And so you don't really have to think about a lot of stuff in this game. And so I do think that it would be kind of a cool way to dip your toes in if you're intimidated by Elden Ring, and especially just by the boss battles, because you're going to have 2 other players. Yes, it's balanced, assuming that you have 2 other players, but you have other people to lean on. And so I do think that it'd be a really interesting experience for a first time Elden Ring player. And me personally, I've been having a really good time with it, and it's just been fun to re-experience this world. So all in all, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 stars, which I know is not a super high score, but again, this is not really the style of game that I usually like to play, and of course I had some issues with it. But overall, I would recommend this game to a lot of people. Is re-experiencing Elden Ring worth $40? I don't know. It is for me, mostly because I'm going to put enough time into it that I'm going to make it worth it, to be honest with you, unless I get a Switch 2 in between now and when Death Stranding 2 comes out, which seems very, very unlikely. This is probably the game I'm going to play between now and when Death Stranding 2 comes out. And again, I haven't gotten tired of it yet. I've been really enjoying my experience so far.
But as always, those are my thoughts on Elden Ring Nightreign. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. Of course, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button, as the kids say. It's just a free and easy way to tell YouTube that you enjoyed this video, which you obviously did if you've made it this far. And they should probably pass it along to other people that might enjoy it as well. Of course, I think if you really enjoyed this video, you should definitely consider subscribing. If you do subscribe, ding that bell. That way you're notified every time I post another video. I try to post weekly gaming related content, which you obviously like, so you should definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. But until next video, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy, and we were just talking and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?